The North Atlantic was a sheet of black glass broken only by the white ghosts of waves. Underneath it, 70 meters down, the world was silent, not dead, just holding its breath. The sound of the ocean pressing on steel was the sound of time itself slowing down. Inside U-609, the air was heavy, wet, and warm enough to taste. Diesel mixed with sweat, oil, and fear. The scent of men who had been breathing the same air for too long. Kapitän Lieutenant Otto Weiss stood at the periscope, one hand gripping the handles, the other resting against the cold metal wall. The lens showed nothing but night and fog. The horizon was gone, and with it the promise of home. "Surface radar clear," said the first officer, his voice low. "No contacts within 20 kilometers. Weiss didn't answer immediately. He watched the blank sea for another 5 seconds, the longest 5 seconds of the night, then lowered the scope. Maintain depth. Engines at silent speed. The order hung in the stale air like incense. No one questioned him. No one ever did. U-609 had been at sea for 53 days, longer than any of them had planned. They had left Lorient in spring. It was now June, and the Atlantic had turned cruel. Convoy raids had gone wrong. Destroyers had learned new tricks. The hunters had become the hunted. Weiss moved through the narrow passage, his shoulders brushing the pipes overhead. Men glanced up from their stations as he passed. Their faces were young and pale, lit by the jaundiced glow of instrument bulbs. One of them, Kruger, the radio man, was whispering a prayer under his breath, not quite quietly enough. "Stop that," Weiss said without turning. Kruger stiffened. "Jawohl, Herr Kapitän." Weiss ducked through the watertight door to the control room. The sonar man sat with headphones clamped to his skull, listening to the deep. His eyes were shut, brow furrowed. "What do you hear?" Weiss asked. "Distant screws, sir," the sonar man said. "Bearing 185, slow, steady. Could be a freighter." "Or a trap," Weiss said. The men exchanged glances. He looked at the chart table. They were 2 days from Iceland, somewhere between fog and nowhere. The sea here was deep, 3,000 meters of dark water. A good place to disappear. "Hold course," he said finally. "We wait until dawn." Hours passed. The submarine moved like a slow thought through the blackness. Every sound, a dropped wrench, a cough, a boot scrape, felt like a sin. At 300, sonar whispered again. "Contact increasing, sir. Bearing steady. Distance closing." Weiss leaned over the scope, heart hammering. "Depth? 75 meters." He raised the periscope just enough to break the surface, the glass filled with the reflection of the moon. And then, a shadow. A silhouette, a destroyer cutting through the waves. British. "Crash dive!" the klaxon screamed. The boat tilted forward, metal groaned as ballast tanks filled. Men grabbed for handholds as gravity shifted. "Depth 150 meters!" The first explosion came seconds later, a deep, bone-shaking roar that rolled through the hull. Dust fell from the ceiling. Instruments rattled. Someone shouted, "They've got us!" "Silent running," Weiss snapped. "Kill all engines." The boat went still. The only sound was the creak of metal and the distant throb of the destroyer's propellers circling above. Depth charges fell like thunder, each one closer, each one louder. Boom, boom, boom! The lights flickered. A pipe burst near the galley, spraying scalding water. Men cursed and ducked. The engineer shouted, "Minor leak, forward compartment, holding for now." Weiss gripped the periscope handles until his knuckles turned white. He knew that rhythm, the destroyer circling, listening, waiting for them to breathe. Another explosion, this one closer. The deck plates jumped underfoot, the hull screamed. Then, silence. For a moment, Weiss thought he'd gone deaf. Then he realized the destroyer had stopped. They were listening. He turned slowly toward the crew. "No one moves," he whispered. "No sound, no air." The men froze. The entire submarine became a held breath. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Sweat ran down backs, down faces, into eyes. Somewhere a droplet of water fell from a pipe and hit the deck. Plink. Weiss flinched. The destroyer moved again, propellers fading, then gone. The men exhaled as one. A laugh broke out somewhere near the aft section, high-pitched and trembling. Someone hushed it immediately. Weiss looked at the pressure gauge. "Depth?" 200 meters, said the navigator. "Too deep." "Level the planes," Weiss ordered. The helmsman turned the wheel. Nothing happened. He turned harder. Still nothing. "Plane's not responding, sir." Weiss's stomach went cold. "Ballast control?" The engineer ran to the valves, spun one open, then another. Steam hissed. Nothing changed. "Sir," he said quietly, "the aft trim tank isn't venting. We can't level out." The boat began to sink faster, the numbers on the depth gauge climbing like a countdown. 250, 270, 300. "Blow ballast," Weiss shouted. The engineer hit the switch. Air roared into the tanks, but the nose didn't rise. "Negative buoyancy." Weiss could feel it. The tilt, the weight, the ocean taking them. The hull began to groan long and low, a sound that lived somewhere between fear and physics. 320, 340, 350. The lights dimmed, then steadied. The pressure gauge needle trembled in the red. Weiss closed his eyes. All stop. The engines died. The submarine kept sinking. 400, 420, 440, then a sudden shuddering crack. The boat jolted. The noise was immense, like the sea itself screaming. The hull had found the seabed. They were alive, barely. "Report!" Weiss shouted. The engineer wiped sweat from his face. "Hull intact, sir. Aft section damaged. We've lost hydraulic control." Weiss exhaled. "How deep?" 452 meters. The hull creaked again, louder this time. Someone whispered, "This boat isn't rated for more than 400. Weiss turned to face them. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "Then we'll find out what happens after that." No one laughed. He looked around the room, at the men's pale faces, at the oil-streaked walls, at the condensation dripping from the pipes like the slow heartbeat of the deep. He had commanded this crew for 2 years. He had taught them how to kill. Now he would have to teach them how to wait for death. Silence in a submarine isn't absence of sound. It's the sound of too much silence pressing in from every direction. The sea above, the steel around, the breath inside your own chest. U-609 lay on the ocean floor like a coffin that hadn't yet decided what to keep. The clocks had stopped working. Time was measured by the rhythm of air pumps and the slow exhale of men sleeping without dreams. Weiss stood near the control room bulkhead, one hand on the cold pipe running along the ceiling. Condensation dripped in a steady pulse onto the deck plates. He counted the drops. That was how he kept from thinking. "CO2 rising," said the engineer. His face glistened with sweat. "We're at 52% of capacity. Filters are running out." "How long?" Weiss asked. "Maybe 12 hours. 12 hours. He nodded. "Keep the pump steady. Conserve power." The engineer hesitated. "Sir, if we don't move, the batteries will die anyway." Weiss looked at him, voice calm. "Better to die quietly than make enough noise for the destroyers to hear." The engineer said nothing more. At first, the crew behaved like professionals. They checked gauges, scrubbed the air filters with rags, whispered jokes to hide the tightness in their chests. But as hours became something slower than hours, the air thickened. Every breath tasted of metal and fear. Kruger, the radio man, began to pray again. No one stopped him this time. By the 8th hour, men's faces had gone gray. Sweat ran without drying. A faint ringing sound haunted the corridors, not from the engines but from inside their skulls. The medic approached Weiss. "Herr Kapitän, the men are dizzy. Some hallucinate. We need to release air from the emergency tanks." Weiss shook his head. "We may need them later." "Later," the medic said, voice rising. "Later we'll be corpses." Weiss didn't look up. "Not yet." The medic stared at him a moment longer, then walked away, muttering. At 0300, the first fight broke out. Two machinists argued over rations of water, voices cutting through the stillness like knives. The argument turned into shoves, then fists. Weiss didn't move until he heard the clang of metal on metal, a wrench hitting the floor. He stepped between them, calm, almost slow. "Enough." They froze. One had blood on his knuckles, the other was crying without sound. Weiss looked at them the way a surgeon looks at an open wound. "You think this helps you breathe easier?" No one answered. "Then get back to work," he said, and walked away. By the 10th hour, the lights began to dim. The batteries were dying. The hum of the pumps faltered. The engineer came again, voice trembling. "Sir, if we shut down the lights completely, we can save 2 hours of air." "Do it." Darkness fell in waves as each compartment went black. The only light left was the phosphorescent glow of instrument dials, ghostly green circles floating in the dark. Men spoke less now. Some whispered to ghosts, wives, children, the sound of rain. Weiss sat on the floor near the control table, head against the steel wall. He thought of the sea above, all that weight, all that cold, and felt an odd peace in knowing it didn't care who he was. He remembered his first patrol, the way the crew had cheered when they'd sunk a freighter, the way he'd smiled, proud, unthinking. Now he couldn't remember the faces of the men on that ship. Only the sound, the crack, the rush, the silence afterward. He wondered if they had prayed too. A soft cough broke the quiet. Kruger again. "Herr Kapitän," he whispered. "The air is gone." Weiss opened his eyes. "Not yet." Kruger shook his head. "You don't hear it?" "Hear what?" "The air. It's thick. It's screaming." Weiss stood slowly. "Everyone to the control room." The crew gathered, pale shapes in the dim green light. "We're going to blow the forward ballast," he said. "Just enough to lift the nose. We'll see if she responds." The engineer hesitated. "If she doesn't, we'll lose pressure balance. It could crush the hull." Weiss met his eyes. "If we do nothing, we'll suffocate. If we act, we might die faster. That's a chance I'll take." The engineer swallowed, then nodded. "On my mark. 3, 2, 1. He hit the valve. Air roared through the pipes. The submarine groaned, tilted upward by a few degrees. Men clung to whatever they could. "Depth? 430. 420. The boat creaked louder, plates flexed. Then, a bang from the aft section. "Pressure line burst," someone shouted. Steam filled the passage. The lights flickered, then steadied. "Hold her there," Weiss yelled. They did. The tilt froze. "Depth? 415. They had risen. Barely. Then the gauges trembled again. The ascent stopped. The engineer whispered, "She's stuck, sir. Mud suction. The sea floor's holding us." Weiss stared at the dial, at the number that refused to move. "Shut the valve," he said quietly. The roar faded. The silence returned. Thicker now. Heavier. As if the sea were laughing through its teeth. Hours passed in a dream. Men drifted in and out of consciousness. Someone sang a lullaby in a broken voice. Another whispered a joke about mermaids. Laughter came, thin and desperate, then vanished. At some point, Weiss found himself speaking without realizing it. "When I was a boy, I used to hold my breath underwater in the river near Dresden. My father would count the seconds. I always thought if I could hold long enough, I'd find another world down there. Kruger smiled faintly. Did you? Weiss looked up at the pipes above them, glistening with water. Maybe this is it. The engineer came crawling through the dark, hands black with oil. Herr Kapitän, there's one option. What is it? We cut the aft section loose. The damaged compartment is full of water. It's dragging us down. If we seal it off, blow the bolts, we might regain buoyancy. How many men are still in the aft section? 4. Weiss's face didn't move. They'd drown. Yes, sir. And if we don't? We all will. The crew stared at him, the question hanging in the stale air like a noose. Weiss closed his eyes. The sound of his heartbeat filled the silence. He opened them again and said very softly, "Prepare the charges." No one argued. They just moved, slow, mechanical, obedient. Kruger crossed himself. 10 minutes later, the boat shook with a muffled thump. The lights flickered. The tilt changed. The nose lifted, barely, but enough. Depth? 400, then 380, then 360. The submarine began to rise. Weiss exhaled, something like relief and sorrow tangled together. He looked at the depth gauge and whispered, "They gave us back the air." The sea above them was still waiting. U-609 rose through the dark like something being remembered, slow, reluctant, as if the ocean wasn't done with them yet. Every man in the control room stared at the depth gauge as if their eyes alone could keep it moving. 340, 320, 300. The hull creaked and popped. Bubbles slid past the windows like small ghosts trying to escape faster. No one spoke. There was nothing left to say. Weiss felt the pressure in his ears change. It was the first real proof they were climbing. He looked at the engineer, who nodded once, a small, almost guilty motion. The air was colder now, the dampness sharper. It smelled less of men and more of salt. 260, 250. A sound rose through the hull and a groan that turned into a roar. The ballast was fighting the sea. The sea was winning. Then, with a sudden jerk, the boat lurched upward. Every loose tool, every plate, every breathless prayer slid toward the bow. "Hold her steady!" Weiss barked. The engineer grinned through his sweat. "She's coming up." 200, 150. Men began to whisper, some laughing, some crying quietly. Kruger pressed his forehead to the steel wall and murmured, "Danke Gott, danke." 100, 80, 50. The sound of water changed. It became lighter, faster, the voice of something thinning. The first shaft of pale light broke through the observation port like a blade. "Surface!" Weiss shouted. "Engines ahead, slow!" The ballast blew with a long metallic sigh. Then, for the first time in 20 hours, U-609 broke the surface. The ocean exploded around her, water cascading off her sides in silver sheets. The night sky was a vast bruise, the stars smeared by fog. Men stumbled onto the bridge, coughing, gasping, faces lifted to the open air. Some laughed wildly. Others just stood there, mouths open, breathing as if it were a forgotten language. Weiss climbed up last. The air hit him like ice and fire together. He tasted salt, cold, and something like forgiveness. They had made it. The surface was silent. Too silent. No destroyers, no bombers, not even the low hum of convoys they had been hunting for weeks. Only fog and the slap of small waves against steel. "Where are we?" Weiss asked. The navigator peered at the instruments, then at the stars, shaking his head. "I don't know, sir. The gyro's dead. The chronometer stopped at 0417. Estimate. Southwest, maybe, near the Faroe Trench? But nothing matches." Weiss looked around. The horizon was a ring of gray, endless, empty. Even the sea seemed unfamiliar, heavier somehow, slower. "Radio check," he ordered. Kruger keyed the transmitter. Static filled the speaker, thick and low like the breathing of a sleeping god. No voices, no code. He tried again, adjusting frequencies. Still nothing. "We're broadcasting on all channels," he said. "No one's there." Weiss stared into the mist. The world looked wiped clean. "Engines to half speed," he said finally. "We'll find the coast." The diesels coughed to life, sputtering like old lungs. The sub cut through the water at 5 knots, leaving a thin white scar behind her. Hours passed. Dawn came thin and sickly. The sun was pale, almost white, casting no warmth. Weiss stood on the conning tower, binoculars pressed to his eyes. There was land ahead, or what looked like it. Low cliffs, shapes of buildings. He smiled, weary and small. "Home," he whispered. They approached slowly. No flag flew on the shore. The buildings looked half-buried, windows broken, roofs collapsed. Kruger joined him. "Sir, that can't be Lorient." Weiss said nothing. The closer they came, the stranger it looked. The docks were rusted through, the cranes twisted like dead trees. The paint on a half-sunk freighter nearby was flaking off, but he could still read the letters. U.S. Navy. Weiss felt his throat tighten. "No," he said quietly. The engineer called up from below. "Fuel's almost gone, sir. We can anchor here." Weiss nodded. "Do it." They eased up beside the derelict ship. The air was heavy with rot and salt. No birds, no voices, just the soft lapping of water against metal bones. "Kruger," Weiss said, "take 2 men. See what's on that hulk." The radio man hesitated. "Yes, sir." They rowed across in the small rubber dinghy. The fog swallowed them whole. Minutes stretched. Then a shout. "Herr Kapitän, you need to see this!" Weiss climbed into the dinghy, the cold biting through his gloves. When he reached the deck of the freighter, he saw it. Rows of corroded containers open to the air. Inside were what had once been aircraft engines, rotted and green. A calendar flapped weakly against the bulkhead, its pages half gone. He tore it free. The date read 1957. He stared at it for a long time. Then he laughed, a soft, broken sound. Kruger frowned. "Sir?" Weiss turned toward the horizon. "We've been under too long." When they returned to U-609, the men waited for answers. He gave them none. He only ordered silence. That night, fog wrapped the sea again. The crew took turns on watch, eyes scanning the nothingness. At dawn, Kruger came to the conning tower. "Herr Kapitän," he said quietly, "if that calendar is true, what are we?" Weiss didn't answer. He was staring east, where a faint light broke through the fog. Not sunlight, but something colder, bluish, pulsing. He raised his binoculars. The shoreline shimmered with towers of metal and glass that reached higher than clouds, silent and still. He lowered the glasses. His voice was barely a whisper. "The war's over." Kruger swallowed. "Who won?" Weiss's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Ask the sea." He turned back toward the hatch. "All hands below, dive the boat." Kruger stared at him. "Sir, we just got out." Weiss looked at him, eyes hollow but steady. "A submarine's place is below." He descended the ladder. The others followed, wordless. The hatch sealed with a dull clang. Moments later, U-609 slipped beneath the surface again, leaving only ripples behind. The sea closed over her like a secret remembered too late. No one ever found her. Some said the currents took her. Others said she was still down there, running silent under a sea that no longer needed wars. But sometimes, on nights when the fog sits heavy and the radar hums with static, sailors swear they hear a voice crackling through the dark. A calm German voice saying, "All stop, maintain depth." And then, silence again. The kind that belongs to the deep.